Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we're exposing something wild. There is literally an invisible puppeteer pulling your strings, emptying your wallet, and skewing your life's biggest decisions without you even realizing it. And don't worry, we aren't going to sit around and give you some slow, boring academic lecture today. Instead, we're going to move fast. We're going to map out exactly how your brain is being hacked and, more importantly, give you the precise tools to take your control back. Let's get started.
First off, let me ask you a question. Why do you, and honestly pretty much everyone else, always fall for that 50% off sticker at the store? You know the drill. You walk in, you see a jacket. You weren't even planning to buy a jacket today, but suddenly you're handing over your credit card because the deal just felt way too good to pass up. So what actually just happened there? Well, your brain was hijacked. Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine you're looking at a price tag. It says $1,000, right? But it's crossed out in red ink, and right underneath it says $500. Now, here's the crazy part. You aren't actually evaluating whether that jacket is worth $500 of your hard-earned money. Not at all. Instead, that first number, the $1,000, acts as a psychological trap. It manipulates your perception of value so aggressively that the $500 suddenly feels like this massive mathematical victory, rather than, an actual expense.
Which brings us to Section 1, the first impression trap. Now, this phenomenon isn't some rare edge case where your brain just randomly glitches out. It's actually a completely normal, though definitely flawed, everyday part of human cognition. We are fundamentally wired to misjudge situations based on the very first piece of information we're handed. Humans simply don't make decisions from a neutral, perfectly logical state. Instead, we rely on what psychologists call heuristics. You can think of heuristics basically as your brain's cognitive shortcuts. Our ancestors lived in this incredibly complex, dangerous world where they had to make split-second decisions just to survive. So to process information quickly, the brain evolved to take these shortcuts. But in our modern, data-heavy world, these quick shortcuts often lead to systematic, highly predictable errors in our judgment.
Moving on to Section 2, defining the anchoring bias.
It's time to officially put a name to that invisible puppeteer manipulating your decisions. It's called the anchoring bias. By definition, this is the tendency to rely far too heavily on the very first piece of information offered, which we call the anchor, during decision-making. Here's the kicker. Once an anchor is dropped into your mind, every single estimate, negotiation, or judgment you make afterward is automatically adjusted relative to that initial value. Even if you know the first number is completely random and arbitrary, your brain simply cannot ignore it. It's stuck.
And look, this isn't just some neat theory. This was famously identified back in 1974 by the legendary psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. They basically proved that humans rely heavily on these heuristics, frequently remaining completely blind to logical, statistical facts that are staring them right in the face. They showed that even experts, we're talking judges and doctors here, are heavily swayed by random numbers introduced right before they have to make a big decision. No one is immune.
So let's look at Section 3, your brain on autopilot. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down Kahneman's dual system model of the brain to explain why this happens. You've got System 1, which is fast, automatic, and driven by those heuristic shortcuts. Then you have System 2, which is slow, deliberate, and capable of actual analytical reasoning. The problem? Well, System 2 is essentially a massive couch potato. It requires a lot of metabolic energy to run. So most of your real-world decisions end up happening in the fast, cheap, lazy autopilot mode of System 1. And System 1 is heavily, heavily influenced by bias. And this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating concept called selective accessibility. When your fast System 1 encounters an anchor, it automatically starts searching your memory for information that validates that anchor. Just picture our stick man here, really struggling under the weight of that massive iron anchor. That is exactly what your reasoning looks like when it's weighed down. Your brain literally represses conflicting information and essentially forces you to agree with that very first impression.
But it gets worse. There are specific conditions that make this puppeteer even stronger. When you're under a high cognitive load, meaning your working memory is totally exhausted by stress, or maybe you're facing extreme time pressure, or you're just overwhelmed with way too many choices, your brain completely abandons System 2 altogether. It clings desperately to the very first number or idea it sees, because it simply doesn't have the energy left to calculate an alternative. Let's jump to Section 4, real-world anchoring effects. Because we really need to shift gears from the psychology lab to your actual life. Here is exactly why your brain is tricking you in your everyday life. Just look at these domains. In retail, that original price is the anchor, tricking you into overspending on false bargains. In salary negotiations, whoever makes the first offer sets the anchor. If a hiring manager lowballs you right out of the gate, your counteroffer will unconsciously be dragged down by that initial low number, literally leading to lower final compensation for you. Even in project planning at work, teams often anchor on the very first solution pitched in a meeting, which completely blinds them to much better alternative designs. It's everywhere. This all ties into something called choice architecture. You really need to realize that the environment around you is rarely neutral. Marketers are out there basically playing 4D chess with your wallet. Corporations, marketers, negotiators, they all act as choice architects. They deliberately design the environment, carefully placing anchors to nudge your behavior in ways that benefit their bottom line, not yours. They are quite literally weaponizing your System 1 autopilot against you. Which brings us to Section 5, how to beat it. So the crucial point is that you actually have a defense against this bias. If this is so hardwired into our evolutionary biology, are we just doomed to be manipulated forever? Absolutely not. We can fight back using what researchers call cognitive forcing strategies. It's time to learn how to sever those puppet strings for good. See, because your System 1 autopilot is unconscious, you cannot simply wish yourself to be unbiased. It doesn't work like that. You have to use structured mental tools that purposefully force your lazy System 2 to wake up and take the wheel. You literally have to force your own analytical reasoning. Research into architectural decision-making actually gives us a highly effective 3-step cognitive forcing strategy. Step 1. Before deciding on anything, explicitly force yourself to generate multiple solution options. Don't just stop at the first one that comes to mind. Step 2. Force yourself to write down at least one concrete drawback of that anchored idea. Step 3. List at least one probabilistic risk. By actively forcing your brain to calculate alternatives, drawbacks, and risks, you chemically shatter that fixation on the initial anchor. It's like breaking a spell. But individual effort isn't always enough, especially in a work setting. Because cognitive bias is largely unconscious, organizations absolutely must build debiasing techniques right into their systems to protect teams from groupthink. This includes things like pre-mortem analysis, where a team imagines a project has spectacularly failed in the future and then works backward to figure out why. It includes assigning a formal devil's advocate to actively challenge the anchored view in the room. And it includes using strict decision checklists to actually document and question underlying assumption. So the ultimate takeaway of this explainer is simply this. You cannot erase the anchor. Once a number or a concept is planted in your head, your evolutionary wiring pretty much ensures it stays there. But by utilizing these cognitive forcing strategies, forcing yourself to pause under heavy cognitive load, and actively seeking out disconfirming evidence, you can absolutely lift that anchor. You can take your power right back from the choice architects. To wrap things up today, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Look back at the last 30 days of your life. Think of a recent major decision you made, maybe a big purchase, a negotiation, or a key project at work. What was your anchor? Who set it, and how much did it pull you off your optimal course? Start identifying these invisible anchors in your daily life, and I promise you, you will never look at a price tag or a negotiation the same way ever again. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next explainer.